Hey warriors, welcome back to the channel. You ever notice how the smarter you get, the lonelier you become, how every conversation feels like work, how you're surrounded by people but completely alone? You watch them connect over things that bore you, laugh at jokes you don't find funny, get excited about topics you figured out 3 thoughts ago, and you feel defective, like there's something fundamentally wrong with you, that you can't just be normal, can't just enjoy surface-level conversation, can't just turn your brain off and exist where everyone else seems comfortable. But here's what's actually happening. You're not broken. You've been exiled by your own intelligence, not because you're arrogant, because you can see the manipulation in small talk, the emptiness in social rituals, the hollowness in friendships built on shared distraction rather than shared depth. You see patterns before they complete. You understand people's motives before they finish speaking. You think strategically while everyone else just reacts emotionally. And that difference, that cognitive gap, it creates a distance most people can't cross. If you're ready to understand why your intelligence has been isolating you and how to transform that isolation into strategic power, subscribe now, because what comes next is the framework that explains why this happens to every intelligent man. And here's the part that destroys most intelligent men. They think it's their fault. They think if they were just more likable, more normal, less in their head, they'd have the connections other people have. So they dumb themselves down. They pretend to care about conversations that bore them. They laugh at jokes they don't find funny. They perform normalcy to earn acceptance. And it's exhausting, and it doesn't work. Because the problem isn't that you're failing at connection. The problem is you're succeeding at something most people never achieve: clarity. And clarity creates isolation. Machiavelli understood something that most intelligent men never learn. The qualities that make you powerful are the same qualities that separate you from the herd. Strategic thinking isolates you from people who only react. Pattern recognition isolates you from people who only see surfaces. Emotional control isolates you from people who are ruled by feelings. You're not alone because something's wrong with you. You're alone because you've outgrown the frequency most people operate on. And the herd will never forgive you for seeing clearly while they stumble in the dark. Stay till the end, because I'm about to show you why your loneliness isn't a flaw, it's a mathematical inevitability, and why the moment you stop apologizing for your intelligence is the moment you become genuinely dangerous. Let me show you exactly what's happening. You walk into a social situation, could be a party, a networking event, a casual gathering, and immediately you're calculating, you're reading the room, you're seeing the social dynamics, the power plays, the unspoken hierarchies. You're 3 moves ahead before the conversation even starts. And everyone else, they're just there, present, reacting, feeling, existing on a level that you left behind years ago. And you try to engage, you really do. Someone starts talking about their day, and you can see where the story's going before they finish the second sentence. Someone complains about a problem, and you've already solved it in your head while they're still describing it. Someone tells a joke, and you see the punchline coming 3 beats early, so when everyone else laughs, you're already analyzing why the joke structure worked instead of just experiencing it. And you realize you can't turn it off, you can't stop seeing patterns, you can't stop thinking ahead, you can't just be in the moment the way everyone else seems to naturally do. So you try to fit in, you force the laugh, you nod along to the conversation, you ask follow-up questions about topics that bore you, you perform interest in things you figured out 10 minutes into the discussion, and it works, kind of. People seem to like you more when you're like this, when you're less you, when you're the dumbed-down, socially acceptable version of yourself. But it's exhausting, and it's hollow, because you're not connecting, you're performing, you're not relating, you're managing, you're not being yourself, you're being the version of yourself that doesn't make other people uncomfortable. And the worst part, it doesn't even work, because people can sense it. They can feel that you're performing. They can tell you're somewhere else, thinking 3 steps ahead while they're still on step 1, so they don't trust you. They don't relax around you. They keep you at arm's length while forming deep bonds with people who are genuinely as shallow as they are. And you're left alone. Again, still, always. This is the intelligence trap, and it's not a flaw in your design. It's not something therapy can fix or social skills can overcome. It's a mathematical reality. The higher your cognitive function, the smaller your compatible population. If you're operating at the 95th percentile of intelligence, you're cognitively incompatible with 95% of people. If you're in the 99th percentile, you're incompatible with 99% of people. It's not personal. It's not that they're bad or you're broken. It's just math. And no amount of social skills training or personality adjustment changes the math. You've been trying to solve the wrong problem. You've been trying to make yourself more relatable, more normal, more accessible. But the problem isn't that you're bad at connecting. The problem is that connection requires cognitive parity, and most people can't operate at the level where you naturally exist. And the gap between where you think and where they think, that gap is unbridgeable through effort. You can't think less clearly. You can't unsee patterns. You can't stop strategizing. You can't turn off the part of your brain that's 3 moves ahead. And they can't speed up to meet you where you are. This is what Machiavelli understood about power and isolation. He wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." But here's what he didn't say explicitly. Once you become the fox, once you see all the traps, you can never go back to stumbling through them blindly with the wolves. You're permanently separated from the herd. Not because you're better, because you operate differently. You see what they don't see. You think how they don't think. And that difference creates a chasm most people can't cross. Let me show you exactly how this happens, how intelligence becomes isolation, how clarity creates loneliness, how the very qualities that should make you successful end up making you alone. Let's start with the mechanism. Why does intelligence create loneliness? It's not mysterious. It's not psychological. It's mathematical. Cognitive compatibility requires proximity. 2 people can only connect meaningfully if they operate at similar cognitive frequencies. And the further you move from the average, the fewer people can match your frequency. This isn't elitism. This is statistics. Think about it. Average IQ is 100. 1 standard deviation above that is 115. 2 standard deviations is 130. 3 standard deviations is 145. At each level, you're eliminating massive portions of the population who can operate comfortably at your cognitive level. By the time you're 2 standard deviations above average, you're already in the top 2% of the population. That means 98% of people you meet are operating significantly below your cognitive frequency. And connection requires proximity, not physical proximity, cognitive proximity. The ability to think at similar speeds, process similar complexity, engage with similar depth. And when there's a significant cognitive gap, connection becomes impossible. Not difficult, impossible. Because what you find interesting, they find confusing. What you find obvious, they find obscure. What you consider basic pattern recognition, they experience as mind reading. And what they find engaging, the small talk, the surface level banter, the emotional processing without strategic thinking, you find exhausting. It's not judgment, it's just incompatibility. You're operating on a different frequency, and frequencies that don't match, don't harmonize, they just create noise. This is the reality that destroys most intelligent men. They don't understand that their isolation is mathematical. They think it's personal. They think if they were just better at social skills, more empathetic, less analytical, they'd connect the way others do. But that's not the problem. The problem is cognitive incompatibility. You can't force connection across a significant intelligence gap any more than you can have a deep conversation with a child. Not because the child is bad, because they're operating on a different level. And once you're operating at a certain cognitive level, dropping down to meet others where they are isn't connection, it's performance. It's exhausting, and it's why you're alone. Let me show you exactly what this looks like. You're at a social gathering. People are talking. Someone tells a story. Everyone laughs. You see the punchline 3 sentences before they deliver it. You see the exaggeration. You see the performance. You see them bonding over shared mediocrity. And you're standing there smiling, nodding, participating, but you're completely disconnected because you're operating on a different level. You're not experiencing the story. You're analyzing it. You're not reacting. You're predicting. You're not present. You're 3 moves ahead. And that distance, that's not social anxiety. That's cognitive incompatibility. Or you're in a relationship. Your partner wants to talk. They want emotional processing. They want you to just feel with them, to be present, to stop thinking. But you can't, because when they're describing a problem, you're already solving it. When they're expressing emotion, you're already identifying the pattern. When they're seeking connection, you're offering strategy. And they get frustrated. They say you're in your head. They say you're not listening. They say you're too analytical. And you think something's wrong with you. You think you're failing at something simple that everyone else can do naturally. But here's what's actually happening. They're asking you to operate at a lower cognitive level to make them comfortable. And you can do it for a while, but it's not sustainable. Because dumbing yourself down isn't intimacy, it's sacrifice. And eventually, you're alone again. Or you're at work. You're in a meeting. Someone proposes a strategy. You immediately see the flaws, the third-order consequences they haven't considered, the assumptions they're making that don't hold, the outcomes they're blind to, and you point it out, and the room gets uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, because you're right, because you saw further than they did, because you thought deeper than they wanted to, and they resent you for it. They don't promote you for it. They don't thank you for saving them from a strategic error. They isolate you for making them feel inferior. And you're confused, because you thought intelligence was supposed to be valuable. You thought seeing clearly was supposed to be respected. But that's not how it works. Intelligence is only valuable when it serves people without threatening them. And if you're smart enough to see what they can't, you're not valuable. You're dangerous. This is the pattern. This is why intelligent men end up alone. Not because they're unlikable, not because they lack social skills, not because they're doing something wrong, because intelligence creates distance. It's not a personality flaw, it's physics. The higher you operate, the fewer people can reach you, the clearer you see, the less comfortable you are with people who are still blind. The more strategically you think, the more exhausting it becomes to interact with people who only react emotionally. And there's no fix for this that doesn't involve you betraying yourself. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." But here's what that actually means for intelligent men. Once you become the fox, once you develop the intelligence to see traps, to recognize patterns, to think strategically, you can never go back to stumbling through life blindly with the wolves. You've developed sight, and sight separates you permanently. And the wolves, they don't want you around because you make them uncomfortable. You see through their social games. You don't laugh at their jokes unless they're actually funny. You don't pretend to care about conversations that bore you. You don't perform enthusiasm for things that don't interest you. And they can feel it. They can feel that you're operating on a different frequency, and it makes them question themselves. It makes them feel less than, so they drift away. They find people who exist on their level, people who don't see through them, people who don't make them feel transparent, and you're left alone, wondering what you did wrong. If you're recognizing yourself in this, If you've been blaming yourself for isolation, that's actually cognitive elevation. Hit the like button now, because what comes next is the framework for transforming this curse into strategic advantage, and it only works if you stop apologizing for your intelligence. So let's talk about what actually happens to intelligent men. Why this pattern is so consistent. Why the smarter you get, the more isolated you become. There are 3 mechanisms at work, and understanding them is the first step to transforming from someone ashamed of their loneliness to someone who weaponizes it. Mechanism 1. Pattern recognition acceleration. When you're intelligent, when you think strategically, you develop pattern recognition faster than people around you. You start seeing the manipulations in small talk, how people use it to establish hierarchy, to fish for information, to perform status. You start seeing the emptiness in social rituals, how most of what people call friendship is just consistent proximity, not actual connection. You start seeing people's motives before they finish their sentences, the favors they're setting up, the status they're seeking, the validation they're fishing for. And once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. You can't go back to participating in them authentically. You can only perform them. And performance is exhausting. Most people never reach this level. They participate in small talk without seeing the manipulation. They engage in social rituals without recognizing the emptiness. They take people at face value without reading the subtext. And that ignorance, that cognitive blindness, it makes connection easier for them. Because they're not thinking, they're just reacting. They're just feeling. They're just being present. But you can't do that anymore. You've developed sight, and sight creates distance. Mechanism 2. Intellectual isolation. When you're intelligent, you think in depth. You consider multiple perspectives. You see nuance. You understand complexity. And most conversation, most human interaction, operates on the surface. People want simple answers. They want clear villains and heroes. They want to know what to think, not how to think. And when you try to introduce complexity, when you try to explore nuance, when you refuse to oversimplify, they get frustrated. Not because you're wrong, because you're making them work. Because you're asking them to think at a level they're not comfortable with. And they resent you for it. So you have a choice. You can simplify your thoughts to match their level, dumb yourself down, give them the simple answers they want, participate in surface-level conversation without introducing the depth you naturally operate in. Or you can be yourself and watch them drift away because you're too intense, too serious, too much in your head. Either way, you're isolated. Either you're isolated while surrounded by people you're pretending for, or you're isolated because you've stopped pretending and people can't handle your reality. Mechanism 3. Emotional control creates distance. When you're strategic, when you think ahead, you develop emotional control. You don't react immediately. You pause, you consider, you calculate. And this makes you different from people who operate on emotion and instinct. They react, you respond. They follow feelings, you follow strategy. They're immediate, you're delayed, and that difference, it makes them uncomfortable. Because they can't read you, they can't predict you, they can't understand you. You're not operating on the same system they are. And humans are deeply uncomfortable with people they can't categorize. So they call you cold, they call you calculated, they say you're in your head, they say you overthink everything, and what they're really saying is, you're not like us. You don't operate on instinct and emotion like we do. And that makes us uncomfortable. And they're right. You're not like them. You've transcended the emotional reactivity that keeps most people predictable and manageable. You've developed the strategic thinking that Machiavelli called essential for anyone who wants real power. But that development has separated you. You're operating in a space most people can't access, and they can feel the distance even if they can't articulate it. These 3 mechanisms, pattern recognition, intellectual depth, emotional control, they're all signs of cognitive development. They're all evidence that you're operating at a higher level. but they all create the same outcome: isolation. You're alone, not because you're failing at something, you're alone because you're succeeding at something most people never achieve. You've developed clarity, and clarity is lonely. Now here's where most intelligent men make the fatal mistake. They think the solution is to fix themselves, to become more social, to develop better emotional availability, to learn how to connect with people at their level. And they can do this. They can learn to perform normalcy. They can learn to dumb themselves down. They can learn to participate in shallow conversations without introducing depth. They can learn to laugh at jokes that aren't funny. They can learn to pretend. And many intelligent men spend their entire lives doing this, performing normalcy to earn acceptance, and it's exhausting, and it doesn't work, because you're not building genuine connections. You're building performances. You're surrounding yourself with people who like the person you're pretending to be, not the person you actually are. And the worst part, the more you perform, the more isolated you feel, because now you're not just alone, you're alone while surrounded by people. You're alone while in a relationship. You're alone while maintaining friendships, because none of it's real. None of it's connecting to the actual you. You've just gotten better at hiding. And hiding is the opposite of connection. It's just sophisticated isolation. So what's the alternative? What does Machiavelli teach about this? Because he understood this pattern intimately. He lived it. He was the strategic advisor who saw clearly while the rulers around him stumbled in the dark. He was the intellectual, isolated by his own intelligence. He was the man writing the manual on power while being kept at arm's length by the powerful. And what he learned, what he teaches, is this: stop trying to fix your isolation, start weaponizing it. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." And what he meant for intelligent men is this: if you can't have genuine connection built on intellectual parity, you can't find people who match your frequency, then don't settle for fake connection built on performance. Be alone. Be comfortable in solitude. Be selective to the point of seeming impossible to reach, because that selectivity, that comfort in isolation, that refusal to accept shallow connection, it creates something powerful. It creates scarcity. And scarcity is attractive. People want what they can't have. They pursue what's rare. They value what's selective. When you're desperately trying to fit in, when you're lowering your standards to earn acceptance, when you're performing normalcy to avoid isolation, you're communicating low value. You're communicating, "I'll take whatever connection I can get because I'm afraid of being alone." And people sense that. They sense the desperation, and desperation is repulsive. But when you're comfortable being alone, when you're not performing, when you're selective about who gets access to you, you're communicating something different. You're communicating, "I don't need connection enough to compromise on quality. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who can't match my frequency." And that comfort, that selectivity, that high standards, it's magnetic. Suddenly, you're not chasing connection, you're filtering for it. And the people who can match your frequency, they're attracted to that. They're drawn to someone who's not desperate, who's not performing, who's comfortable in the isolation that comes with high standards. This is the transformation, from trying to fix your loneliness by lowering your standards and performing normalcy, to weaponizing your loneliness by raising your standards and becoming comfortable in solitude, from needing connection to selecting for it, from shame about isolation to pride in it, because your isolation isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence of standards. It's evidence that you won't compromise on cognitive compatibility just to avoid being alone. And that refusal to compromise, that's power. If this is shifting how you see your own isolation, if you're starting to understand that your loneliness is a filter, not a flaw, hit that like button. It tells me this message is landing, and it pushes this to others who need to stop apologizing for their intelligence. Now let me show you what this actually looks like in practice. How to transform from someone ashamed of their isolation to someone who weaponizes it, How to go from desperately trying to connect with people who bore you, to being selective enough that only worthy people get access to you. How to turn the curse of intelligent solitude into the ultimate strategic advantage. Step 1. Stop performing normalcy. This is the hardest step because you've been doing it for so long, it feels like part of your personality. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You engage in small talk that bores you. You pretend to care about topics that don't interest you. You dumb down your thoughts to make others comfortable. And every single instance of this performance is you betraying yourself. It's you choosing their comfort over your authenticity. It's you accepting that you need to be less than you are to earn acceptance. Stop. Just stop. Let the jokes that aren't funny hang in the air without your false laughter. Let the conversations that bore you die natural deaths. Stop pretending to care about things you don't care about. Stop dumbing yourself down. Yes, this will make people uncomfortable. Yes, they'll drift away. Yes, you'll end up more alone than you already feel. But here's what you're not understanding. You're already alone. You're just alone, while surrounded by people who don't actually know you. You're alone, while performing for an audience that likes the fake version of you. Removing the performance doesn't make you more alone, it makes your aloneness honest. And honest isolation is better than fake connection, always. Step 2. Raise your standards for connection. You've been accepting anyone who will talk to you because you're afraid of being completely alone. You've been maintaining friendships that feel like work, because at least it's some form of social contact. You've been in relationships with people you're intellectually incompatible with, because at least it's companionship. Stop settling. Raise your standards to the point where most people don't meet them, and be comfortable with that. Be comfortable saying, I'd rather have no friends than friends who bore me. I'd rather be single than in a relationship with someone I have to dumb myself down for. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people operating at a frequency I've outgrown. This sounds harsh, it sounds arrogant, it sounds like you're being too picky. Good, because the alternative is what you've been doing, accepting everyone, connecting with anyone, lowering your standards to avoid isolation. And how's that working? You're still alone. You're just alone while maintaining hollow relationships that drain your energy. Raise your standards, be selective, filter ruthlessly, and accept that this means you'll be alone more often. Because the few people who meet your standards, they're rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent. Step 3. Become comfortable in solitude. This is the transformation. This is where you go from someone who's afraid of being alone to someone who prefers it. Most people can't do this. They need constant social contact. They need validation. They need external stimulation. They're terrified of being alone with their own thoughts. But you're intelligent, you're strategic, you have an internal world rich enough to occupy you. Use it. Spend time alone without trying to fill it. Read, think, create, build, develop skills, pursue interests. Become the kind of person who's so engaged with their own development that social contact is optional, not necessary. And here's what happens when you do this. You become magnetic. Because people can sense when someone doesn't need them. They can sense self-sufficiency. They can sense abundance mentality. And it's attractive. The man who's desperate for connection, repulsive. The man who's comfortable alone, magnetic. Because he's demonstrating that he has internal resources, that he doesn't need external validation, that he's complete without them. And that completeness, that self-sufficiency, it's the ultimate form of high value. It communicates, I don't need you. If you're in my life, it's because I chose you, not because I needed someone. Step 4. Be strategically unavailable. Once you're comfortable in solitude, you can weaponize it. You can be selective about when and how people access you. You don't respond immediately. You don't always be available. You don't maintain contact out of obligation. You operate on your terms, and this creates mystery. It creates value. It makes your time and attention scarce, and scarcity drives value. The person who's always available, low value. The person who's strategically unavailable, high value, because you're communicating through your behavior. My time is valuable. My attention is valuable. Access to me is valuable. And you don't give valuable things away for free. This isn't about playing games. This isn't about manipulating people through artificial scarcity. This is about recognizing that your time and attention actually are valuable and protecting them accordingly. You're not pretending to be busy to seem important. You actually are busy with your own development, your own interests, your own work, and social contact. It fits into your life when it's worth it. Not as the default, not as the primary focus, as an addition to an already full life. Step 5. Filter for cognitive compatibility. When you do engage socially, you're not trying to connect with everyone. You're filtering for the few people who can match your frequency. You're testing cognitive compatibility early. You introduce complexity in conversation and see if they engage with it or get frustrated. You think out loud strategically and see if they follow or get lost. You express opinions that require nuance and see if they can handle ambiguity or need simple answers. And most people will fail these tests. They'll prove themselves cognitively incompatible. And that's fine. That's the filter working. You're not looking for quantity. You're looking for quality. You're looking for the rare individuals who can exist where you exist. And when you find them, when you find someone who thinks in depth, who handles complexity, who matches your strategic thinking, you'll know, because the conversation won't feel like work. The connection won't feel like performance. You won't have to dumb yourself down. You won't have to pretend. You'll just be operating at your natural level, and they'll be there with you. And that connection, rare as it is worth more than 1,000 shallow friendships. It's worth more than maintaining relationships out of fear of being alone. It's the only connection that actually matters. This is what Machiavelli understood about power and isolation. The powerful are always isolated because they operate at a level most people can't reach, because they see clearly while others stumble in the dark, because they think strategically while others react emotionally. And that isolation isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the natural consequence of elevation. And the moment you accept this, the moment you become comfortable with it, the moment you stop apologizing for it, you've transformed. You've gone from victim of your intelligence to beneficiary of it, from ashamed of your isolation to weaponizing it, from desperate for connection to selective about it. Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel." And what he meant is this: most people operate on surface. They see appearances, they react to emotions, they exist in the immediate. But you operate on depth. You see beneath appearances. You think beyond emotions. You exist in the strategic. And that difference, that cognitive gap, it means you'll always be somewhat alone. Because few people can operate where you operate. Few people can think how you think. Few people can match your frequency. And that's not a tragedy. That's mathematics. That's the natural result of cognitive development. And the moment you accept this, the moment you stop trying to fix it, or apologize for it, or perform your way out of it, you become free. Free to be exactly who you are. Free to think exactly how you think. Free to operate at exactly the level you've reached. And that freedom, that authenticity, that refusal to compromise your intelligence for social acceptance, it creates an aura of power that the desperate can never replicate. The desperate man performs normalcy to earn acceptance. The powerful man is himself and filters for those who can handle it. The desperate man lowers his standards to avoid being alone. The powerful man raises his standards and becomes comfortable in solitude. The desperate man needs connection. The powerful man selects for it. And that difference, that shift from needing to selecting, from performing to being, from shame to weaponization, that's the transformation. You're alone because you're intelligent. Accept it. You're isolated because you think strategically. Embrace it. You're separate because you see clearly. Weaponize it. Stop trying to be less than you are to make others comfortable. Stop performing normalcy to earn acceptance from people who bore you. Stop maintaining hollow relationships out of fear of being completely alone. Just be intelligent, be strategic, be yourself, and let that be the filter. Most people will fail, they'll drift away, they'll prove themselves incompatible with who you actually are, and that's fine, because the few who remain, the rare individuals who can match your frequency, who can engage with your depth, who can exist where you exist, those are the only relationships worth having, and you'll never find them while you're surrounded by people you're performing for. You'll only find them when you stop performing and start filtering. This is Machiavelli's theory of why intelligent men end up alone, not because they're broken, not because they're doing something wrong, but because intelligence elevates you to a frequency that most people can't access. And the moment you accept this, the moment you stop seeing your isolation as a flaw and start seeing it as evidence of your elevation, everything changes. You stop trying to fix yourself. You start filtering for compatibility. You stop performing normalcy. You start being authentically you. You stop needing connection. You start selecting for it. And that shift from victim to architect, from ashamed to empowered, from desperate to selective, that's the transformation that makes you dangerous. Because you've transcended the need for external validation. You've become comfortable in the solitude that terrifies most people. You've accepted that your intelligence comes with isolation, and you've decided that's a price worth paying. And that acceptance, that comfort, that refusal to compromise, it makes you the rarest kind of person. The person who doesn't need anyone, which makes you the person everyone wants. You can't go back now. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you now know. Your isolation isn't a personal failing. It's a mathematical result of your cognitive development. And the moment you stop trying to fix it and start leveraging it, the moment you become comfortable being the person most people can't understand, you've won. Not by becoming more connected, by becoming more selective, not by lowering your standards, by raising them to the point where most people don't qualify, not by performing normalcy, by being authentically you, and letting that be the filter. If you're ready to stop apologizing for your intelligence and start weaponizing your isolation, subscribe and turn on notifications. This channel is for men who've accepted that being alone is better than being surrounded by people who can't match their frequency. Drop a comment telling me which step you're implementing first. Share this with another intelligent man who's been blaming himself for isolation that's actually cognitive elevation, because the world is divided into two groups, people who dumb themselves down to fit in, and people who raise their standards and filter ruthlessly, and you just joined the second group. The intelligent man doesn't end up alone because he's unlikable. He ends up alone because he's unwilling to compromise his intelligence for social acceptance, and that unwillingness, that refusal to be less than he is, that's not weakness. That's the ultimate form of strength. That's the Machiavellian understanding that power requires isolation, that clarity creates distance, that strategic thinking separates you from the herd. And if you're alone right now, if you're reading this and recognizing yourself in every word, good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Stop apologizing for it. Stop trying to fix it. Start weaponizing it. Because your isolation isn't the problem. Your attempt to escape it by compromising yourself, that's the problem, and you just solved it.